Howdy, folks. Welcome back to Cowboy Garage. This week we're back on the 61 Volkswagen. We're going to be cutting out this broken frame head and replacing it with this new one. Now, along the way, we're going to talk about the differences between the aftermarket and the original. I had several questions on my video where I showed you the broken head. People are wanting to know how's the thickness of the replacement metal, how's the fit, how's the design. And spoiler alert, it's not terrible, but it's not quite the same. It'll do. But the first step is to clean this up. So you guys are going to get to fast forward through it. I've got to suffer through all the grungy work. So let's get to it.
So we're going to clean this pan up with a wire wheel Honda grinder. We're not trying to get it ready for paint. We're just trying to get it ready to drill and then weld back together. So in order to know where the spot welds are, we got to get all the rust and mud and everything else off the top of it. So with that cleaned up, we can move the camera in a little closer and I'll show you these spot welds I'm talking about. Every one of these little circles is a place where they took an electrode on the top, an electrode on the bottom, pressed them together and ran some current through it and just melted the metal together. That's how cars are made. So they are everywhere. This car has more of them than most. And then this center section, there's just a continuous weld for about 8 inches or so. So we've got to get rid of all of these welds. Now that we have the bottom cleaned up, it's time to spin the rotisserie so we can get to the top side of the car. First thing I'm going to do is cut off these tabs so they're not in my way. It's hard enough to get into a corner with an angle grinder, and especially with a handle on it, so let's throw that away too. And we just run this seam on both sides, cleaning it up with the wire wheel as best we can. The cleaner it is, the easier it is to find all of the spot welds, because inevitably you miss one. Foreshadowing. So I have no idea why I didn't move that throttle cable out of my way, because it was clearly irritating me, but you know how it goes. Sometimes you just can't see the forest for the trees. So now I'm showing you here on the bottom where I'm going to be cutting. I'm going to cut out that solid weld and drill out all 18 million spot welds. It's easier to drill them from the bottom here because the bottom is flat. Now for drilling these out, I start off with these little 1/8 inch double-ended drill bits. The Cobalt style, not brand, but Cobalt style, are significantly harder. They last a lot longer, but even the regular high-speed steel, they're just great. These things are cheap. You get 2 for 1 price since it's double-ended, and they're handy for a whole lot of things in auto body. So anyway, get your 1/8 inch bit, find a drill, preferably something that spins on the fast side of life, and then you just start going around everywhere you can find a spot weld and drill out the middle of it. Once we have all the middles drilled out, then we can go back around with something like a unibit, step bit, or just a larger bit. I usually just use a 1/4 inch Cobalt bit. That works for me. But make your way around here. As you can see, there are a lot of these spot welds. And yes, after about 20 of them, your arm's about to fall off. But keep plugging away, take a break. Coffee's your friend. It doesn't help anything, but it makes you feel better. And just keep drilling until you're done. Now on this particular job, I did not count, but I'd say there was probably around 40 of those spot welds that I drilled out, maybe more. And I did it all with one end of 1 bit. So when you figure those Cobalt bits are about $1 a piece, I think they're about $22 for a pack of 25. So anyway, it's pretty cheap. Now I'm showing you there that we've stepped up to the 1/4 inch bit. And we're going to drill through. These holes that are left from drilling this out will become our holes for plug welding when we're done. As you see, I switched to the bigger drill. The little guy was just struggling a little bit, drilling through multiple layers of metal with that 1/4 inch bit. When you have multiple layers of metal, when you break through the first one, it starts kind of hugging the bit as you're trying to drill the second one, and it can be a little bit of a workout for the drill. So with all the drilling done, now it's time for the fun tools, the air hammer or air chisel, whatever. So just find a corner and start working it. Now if you've never used one of these before, go in spurts. Do not just push hard and pull the trigger. If you bury that thing in there, you will be trying desperately to get it out, as we'll see here in a few. But in typical fashion, I forgot a step. I should have ground this weld out first, just because it's easier to grind it while everything's sitting still instead of trying to grind it out while everything's flopping around, because you've already knocked loose all of the spot welds. So anyway, back to spot welding. And over here, as you see, I pushed it in a little too far. You just throw a pry bar in there, pull it up, wiggle, jiggle, swear you'll never do it again, and then 30 seconds later, do it 4 or 5 more times. So you can see we've already got some of them on the front side came loose just from rattling the back. So we'll continue our way around the front. Now if you noticed, I didn't do any drilling on that hump. We'll see why here in a few. So I'm going to cut that tunnel out about an inch or so in front of where the spot welds are. A little bit later I'll explain why I did that, but this is pretty common in the restoration universe. So just enjoy, watch the sparks. We'll get into the why later. Now, as you notice, I am using a guard with this cutoff wheel. I'm also using a face shield. It's a pain in the butt having a guard on there, but your face will thank you later. So once I get the top side cut, I flip it back over to the bottom and just start making this hole bigger. It's really hard to reach the inside of a corner, especially when you have an angle grinder and a guard and everything else. So I just cut some of the bottom away, found my grooves from the top, and just kind of connect the dots, or connect the slots, however you want to look at it. So once you have that done, just wiggle and jiggle and it'll pop right off. Or not. I guess this is where we're going to have to bring old Blue back into the game. So a little bit more air chiseling. Not only are air chisels one of the most wonderful tools in the world, they're one of the worst tools in the world. I'm thankful to have it, but my goodness is it irritating listening to that thing. So just keep whittling away at it, and eventually you've got the old part off. One more spot. Here we go. Yep. That foreshadowing from earlier, there's a spot weld that I missed when I was drilling them. And now we're done. A little bit mangled there on the corner, but it'll work.
Okay, be it ever so ugly, it is a part. So the next step is to dress up what's left and get it ready for the replacement head. So that's going to mean going around here with a hammer and a dolly, smoothing up this flange, knocking off the rust off the bottom of it, fixing this mangled up area, trimming this back to a consistent dimension, and then we can prep the head, and then we'll be ready to weld.
Now every body man should have at least one really good quality body hammer. You should also have some junk hammers, some mini sledgehammers like this, and some really cheap body hammers. Work like this is roughing work, and you don't want to mar up the face of a $60, $70 body hammer. So beat it close to shape, get it as good as you can with the big ugly hammer, and then switch to a little better hammer and work your way around the flange with dolly. What you're trying to do is get it as smooth and straight as possible. Once that's done, go around with a flapper disc and make it true. Get rid of any welds that you missed. The more work you do on prep, the better your life is when it comes time to finish. And that's universal for most things, but especially body work. So now I'm just using this little small handheld sandblaster to knock off the rust down in this channel, inside this Napoleon hat they call it. And once I get all the rust knocked off, I'm going to hit it with a little bit of weldable primer, and then the body will be done, or rather the pan will be done, other than a little bit of trimming that we'll see in the fitting portion of the next video. So here we are throwing some weld through primer on it, and now it's all beautiful. So there were quite a few requests of comparing the aftermarket panels to the original, and so I wanted to take a moment and do that before we get any farther along. So the metal thickness is pretty consistently the same. The aftermarket panel is a little bit thinner in some places. It's actually thicker in a couple of places. So we'll just call that part a wash. The biggest disappointment is in the quality of the stamping. So you see here this flange, how it rolls all the way around the corner and halfway to the end, ends about the middle between those two holes. Here, it stops right at the beginning of the curve, which really makes the curve a lot weaker and takes out some of the rigidity and strength of this part. Now also, this rib that I just pointed at doesn't go as close to the holes on the aftermarket one as it does on the original. A lot of places you had just horrific weld spatter and just little remnants of MIG wire everywhere. I bet there were 30 little trimmings of MIG wire. Not that that hurts anything, it's just, not as nice. Less professional, if you will. And the biggest disappointment was on the front of the frame head. So here's the original. You've got this contoured section, access cover, has built-in threads for an oval block-off plate. There's tabs in there for your lines. And on the aftermarket one, it's just flat with a hole. That's it. Doesn't hurt anything, but it's definitely not as nice. And then these little tabs are not bent up. These ribs stop about 2 inches before the end, whereas the factory ones went to about a half an inch or so. It's missing a clip on the top where the brake reservoir connects to the master cylinder, just holds the line in place. It's just overall not as nice.
Well, folks, this is a good stopping point for today. This project is a little more in depth than can be done in one video, short of having a 45-minute long video. So next week we'll come back, we'll go over measuring, aligning, and welding this in, and then we can start cleaning up this pan and fix a couple of holes in the back, and see if we can't have this pan ready to paint by the end of the month. So thank you for watching. God bless. Have a good one.